Good evening, fellow history buffs. This is John. What's up? No, I've not forgotten about this channel. In fact, I want to speak on it for a second, and then we're going to talk about one of the most interesting armies in the history of mankind. All right. And they do not get a lot of credit. They are one of the original, I would say, Wolverines. All right. From Red Dawn. Okay. So this channel has been, I've had the ability for a while now to monetize this channel. I haven't done it, and I won't do it until I get to the point in a few weeks where I can concentrate solely on writing, preparation, and this channel. So once I'm able to put a lot of my time and effort into this channel, this history channel, the backup channel, whatever you want to call it, son, at that point we may do it. We shall see. But I just wanted to let you folks know that. Not forgotten about the channel. I'm going to be spending a lot more time over here in a couple of weeks when college finishes up. So check it out. I'm going to put an article down below. You guys can read it if you want to, if it's interesting to you. During World War II, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union basically co-invaded Poland, right? So the Germans were the first to go in. The Soviets went in on the other side, and their idea was to carve up Poland, to get rid of all of sense of nationality, to carve it up and basically absorb it. Poland did not last long. Their idea of anti-aircraft was, and I wish I was kidding when I say this, guys, but I'm not. They had a few planes that didn't last long. They were outdated planes. But their idea of anti-aircraft were 6 or 12-man squads laying on the ground and shooting rifles in the air. Not kidding. So they didn't last long, you know, against the Blitzkrieg coming from Germany against the Soviet war machine. Most of their leadership fled the country. They exiled. They tried to run the country from outside the country. The problem in doing something like that, the French did this as well during World War II, is not a lot of people that are left behind are still going to take marching orders from people that bolted. For good reason, right? So the people that were left behind in Poland, there were a couple of established leaders, and then there were just groups of people that were willing to fight, citizen soldiers. What we would consider in the prepping community to be mags, you know, heavily outfitted mags. What they decided to do was form their own underground army. And again, I'll drop that link down below. It ended up throughout Poland by the end of World War II, I think it was around 300,000 members. And so in the United States, what this would look like would be 6, 7, maybe 10 very large mags. Now, we wouldn't have 300,000 people, right? But 6 or 7, maybe again 10, very large, very organized, and heavily outfitted mags coming together. This doesn't mean that you come together and camp together, etc. That's not how they did it in Poland either. They would have designated spots where they could meet outside of the policing of the Germans especially, and also the Soviets, places that were kind of off the radar. They would meet up and they would swap goods, they would barter and exchange things. They would exchange information. They would exchange, you know, if this group had plenty of bullets, but they didn't have a lot of food, and this group had the food and they didn't have a lot of bullets, they would, you know, they would swap information, and it became a real network, a real working military behind the scenes. The Germans knew they were there. They couldn't find them. They couldn't get rid of them. Okay, they could bomb as many buildings as they wanted to. They could go house to house. They just couldn't find these people. They couldn't figure out who it was. Same with the Soviets. And what's interesting here is everybody had a part to play in this, you know, this underground army. People, we talked the other day about people that can't fight need to be willing to support those that can, okay? So if you look at any military, look at the current U.S. military, all right? Not everybody has the job of infantryman. Not everybody grabs a rifle when it kicks off and goes in. There are various jobs throughout the military. And it was the same thing back then in Poland, and it's the same thing today. Everybody has a part to play. It doesn't matter what your age is or your situation. It doesn't matter if you're disabled to a degree. You can still contribute. Some of the disabled people in Poland would actually gather the information, you know, from the different mags through, or I'm calling them mags, but the groups, through the various meetups. They would get all this information. They would collect it. And they were printing their own news. They were putting it on leaflets. And these leaflets would just show up in Poland. They would let people know what was going on outside of the German propaganda machine and the Soviet propaganda machine, stuff like this. It was really neat that they were able to do this because they were under heavy persecution. When, especially on the German side of things, when the Nazis came in, they were taking religious books, they were taking educational books, they were burning them, and they were forbidding any kind of religious activities whatsoever. It doesn't mean they were stopping them, right? We saw this back in Rome. The Romans tried to stop Christianity, and they just couldn't stop it. When people have faith, it doesn't matter what the religion is. If people are devout enough, they're not going to be stopped from worshiping. And the same thing was happening in Poland. And this gave people hope. If there's ever, and this is important because if there's ever boots on the ground here in the U.S., whether they are the blue helmets, whether they are North Korea, China, whatever, they're going to be able to control most of the country, but they can't be everywhere all at once. There's just no way. And the Polish, they learned how to, I guess, play out of bounds. They learned the movements of the Germans, the military. They learned the movements of the Red Army. They knew, they were very observant. They knew when shift changes were and what kind of time frame they had to pass information along back and forth or to get from point A to point B. They knew, okay, you know, the Germans, you know, they change shifts at 8 p.m. I'm just spitballing here. So at 8 p.m., there's about a 10-minute window where things are kind of chaotic and we can move a little more freely. And they did. And they would, you know, again, barter. They would pass information along. And this next point is very important, especially if you're already in a mag here in the United States and you're one of the folks that, you know, wants to stand up and fight. And here's the thing. I'm not pushing any kind of extremism. Very important on this channel. I would never, ever do that. No sort of violence whatsoever. But I'll say this. We have a constitution in place. And we all, if you're a citizen of the United States, you have a duty and a responsibility to defend this country by any means necessary, okay? Foreign and domestic, right? As the armed forces know all too well, but that applies to citizens. If there's a boots on the ground invasion, you are well within your rights to defend your country. A lot of people don't understand that. So they learned tactics. They learned how to hurt, very much like the Wolverines did. They learned how to hurt the enemy. They were very limited in how they could do it. It's, to use an analogy, it's kind of like having, the Germans were this big, huge, burly bodybuilder. Muscles everywhere. Nobody wanted to mess with the dude. So the Polish underground army, they decided, hey, we're going to be that itch that they just can't scratch. We're going to be there night and day. We're going to pester them to the point where the Germans have to stop doing what they're there to do. And they constantly have to try and scratch. They would take out bridges that were necessary. They knew their country better than the occupying force. So they knew, for example, okay, the Germans, they got a lot of troops here. They're going to need to feed these troops. And they're going to need to clothe them. They're going to need to make sure they have ammunition. They're going to have a supply line. So we don't have the weaponry to knock out the actual supply line, but we do have the weaponry to take out the necessary bridges. And so now, instead of a direct shot for the German supply line, now they're zigzagging all over the place. And in making them zigzag all over the place, this underground army, they were able to develop very small zones like kill boxes where they would ambush and they would do a lot of damage. And they were just constantly pestering the occupying forces. Now, it didn't help Poland out all that much because its army had been decimated. But the reason I'm telling you this is in a boots on the ground here in the United States, we're a lot larger than Poland. And we have a lot more Second Amendment folks than they had, World War II in Poland. We have a much stronger military. It may be that MAGs can pester an occupying force to the point where you weaken them and you kind of get them off their game plan, and then our National Guard, for example, can counterstrike them. You can weaken an enemy with very few resources if you're smart about how you do it. Again, bridges, railroad tracks. They would just blow up the railroad tracks because they knew it's going to take them forever to build this back, son. They can't repair this in one day. It's going to take a massive, concentrated effort. And so the Germans would show up, and it would take them, a week or something of hard labor to repair this section of railroad tracks. And then the very next day, they would blow up a different section. And so the Germans were constantly having to focus on the railroad tracks and how do we stop these people. They constantly had bridges being sacked and things like that. They would find out where the depots were at. Once the supplies arrive and they start unloading the supplies, very much like Wolverines, guys, on Red Dawn. They would keep the supplies here in this building. Let's set the building on fire. These types of things. It was just constant and it was nonstop. So the point with all of this is everybody has a part to play. Don't think just because, maybe you're not 6'8" and in the best shape of your life and you're not loaded to the teeth with, ARs or whatever. Maybe you're elderly, or, maybe you got the dad bod going on or something like that. Everybody can contribute in some way. Again, especially if you're already in a MAG. A MAG's number one priority should be surviving SHTF, okay? But a MAG really needs to think long term, because if you went as far as setting up a MAG and organizing in that way, you must expect something long term is coming. And so there's nothing at all wrong with trying to link up with other MAGs. You don't want to tell them everything that you have. You don't want to tell these people where you keep things, or, we're going to be holed up here on the map. You don't want to do that. But maybe reach out and, communicate with another MAG about your size and say, look, here would be a perfect meeting spot if SHTF happens. If we go Mad Max, let's meet here once a week and let's swap things out, information, etc. Continue to stack everything that you possibly can. I mean, we have so much canned food here, and this isn't even the bug out. We stockpile stuff here just in case we can't get to the bug out if something really bad happens. But we have two bug outs. We have our prime area, which has the well, and we have the wood stove there, and it's way off grid. Sometimes I film over there. We have a second one that sometimes I'll go camping there with Outlaw Prepper and Caveman James. The last camping video we did was there. It is way off grid, but we don't have the well. We don't have the wood stove. So that's plan C. But these things are purposely here and here because, we may not be able to get to this bug out. Danger may be coming from this way, so we may have to go here instead. Think as far ahead as you possibly can. And folks, I'm going to encourage you, if you're interested, it's not for everybody, but look, if you're in a MAG and you're thinking long term, check out the information, check out the link I dropped below. Do your own research on the Polish underground army, because I promise you, they will make you proud. They had almost nothing, and they were a constant wart on the backside of the Germans. They caused a lot of headaches for the Germans and also the Red Army. And you can learn tactics from these folks. The weapons have changed, the tactics have not changed. Since the beginning of time, since the very first global war, supply lines have mattered. I mean, they just have. Tactics have basically been the same. We've swapped out bows and arrows, of course, with artillery and airstrikes, but the tactics remain the same. So study them and maybe reach out to other mags. Maybe, let me close with this, maybe put somebody in your mag in charge of contacting other mags and setting this stuff up. That would be an excellent job for somebody that maybe they're not great with a rifle, okay? But they can contribute in this way. And it can really go a long way to prolong how long you make it in a Mad Max. Folks, this is John here at the History Channel. I can't believe it's a short premiere, but look, son, I'm trying. I'm over here treading water. Couple more weeks, and then I'll be able to hit it full time. Y'all have a blessed day.